In this video, we're going to talk about effective note-taking. For many students, the lecture environment is a new one, and it's important to learn how to get the most out of your classes by taking useful notes. Taking notes can be more important in university for a few reasons. University courses move quickly, and you'll need to have as many sources of information as possible to review material. The material an instructor includes in a lecture usually emphasizes important points, and it will be your job to figure those out and make note of them. Note-taking is also a great way to help you remember material in the future, and it forces you to concentrate on the subject matter while in class. Your notes are ways of summarizing or reducing large amounts of information to concise and important points. Your notes will be an important study tool and will help you in anticipating concepts, problems, and questions that will be on a test or an exam. This is the best way to approach studying. In some cases, it's not the amount of time you spend studying, but how effectively you use that time. Where you sit in a lecture can have a major impact on how effectively you take notes. Studies show that students who sit closer to the front of a class generally do better, but it's important you sit in a spot that works well for you. Make sure there aren't any obstructions to your view, such as the instructor's writing hand, or any distractions such as friends or other students nearby that prevent you from paying attention. In general, cultures are developed in lecture where certain groups of students sit in particular areas of the classroom that are established sometimes from the first lecture. Thinking about where you want to position yourself in a class is something important to consider before starting in September. Being prepared for class is the best way to do well in engineering. Students who do well often do their readings before class or try out any practice problems before the lecture. It takes several attempts to learn something, so exposing yourself to the material before class is the best way to learn the material well. Also, be engaged while you're in class and don't be afraid to ask questions. Lectures are the best opportunities to clarify anything you're unclear about. Consider carefully what you decide to bring to your classes. You want to be sure only to bring things that will help you in class rather than keep you from taking notes and paying attention. For some, this means a laptop or a tablet, but maybe it's traditional paper and pen. Every student should figure out the most effective way to take notes that works for them. It's important that when you're taking notes, you're not just writing down every single thing the instructor says, but thinking actively about what the instructor is saying, what's important, and why and how does this information connect with other things you've been learning. Thinking about the material while you're taking notes will keep you from writing down unnecessary information and will help you to learn the material earlier. Different students will have different ways of taking effective notes. The key is to determine what works best for you. We're going to go through some tips and some examples of what lecture notes could look like. Dates, headings, and subheadings are good ways of helping you organize your notes so that you can easily refer back to them later. These are ways of helping you sort your notes at a later date. You want to write things down that the instructor seems to be placing emphasis on. These would include information that the instructor repeats several times or things that the instructor makes a point to write down. Since you'll be trying to capture as much information as possible in a short period of time, you want to make use of tools such as lists, bullet points, abbreviations, or acronyms to make your notes concise. If you miss something or something the instructor says is unclear, leave a space in your notes. Make a point to clarify what you've missed and add it into your notes at another time. Often, using visual cues in your notes will help you to remember the important parts of your notes and to easily find the parts you need to pay most attention to. Students should use diagrams, graphics, and color to emphasize certain parts. Also, other visual cues such as highlighting and underlining can be helpful. Just be sure to only do this for important points, or you run the risk of highlighting too many things and missing the most important. Here's an example of clear notes that use diagrams and color effectively. It's clear what equations are important and what parts of the note will be useful when reviewing later. This is another very different set of notes. Here, notes are taken in a linear fashion, but the student has used color to emphasize key points, but also to highlight additions to the notes made after the lecture. Headings are used to organize the notes, and numbers and symbols help to show relationships between points. Some students find structured methods of taking notes more effective and may use something like the Cornell note-taking method. Following this method, you record notes during the lecture. Following the lecture, you reduce and summarize your notes at the bottom of the page and generate key questions and main points related to the lecture on the left-hand side. Later, use these cues to generate the information that you recorded in your notes from memory. Reflect on these cues so that you can understand the significance of the material and how it relates to other things you've learned in class. Use these notes to review material on a regular basis. Reviewing notes weekly is a great way to learn the material. Here are some other things to consider when thinking about what to write. Each instructor will have their own method of approaching a problem. Pay attention to that method while understanding different approaches. Try to understand their approach as much as possible. Examples in classes are meant to help you apply what you've learned to solving different problems. Make note of each step and try to explain the steps in your notes. Instructors might explain where formulas or theorems originate. Unless this is purely algebraic, you might not need to write everything down, but rather take time to watch and listen carefully. And if you don't understand something, always ask questions. Instructors will increase the pace of the lecture as the semester goes on, and they will start to take for granted what students know. They will expect that certain things will become clear, such as units in a problem. They may start dropping units from numbers when writing out calculations. Make sure you fill these in and understand them as the instructor works through a problem. Being familiar with the relevant sections of the textbook before a lecture will help you identify what information you can return to in the textbook at a later date, and what you need to ensure is explained clearly in your notes. Make a note of references to the text. You'll want to go back to these later. Some common mistakes students make include highlighting too many sections of lecture notes. This makes it difficult to determine the key points and makes it unclear what should be emphasized. It's also important that you don't rely too much on PowerPoint slides provided by the instructor before class. If you're going to use them, you have to fill in the information covered in the lecture. Also, memorizing your notes isn't going to be helpful in engineering. You must be able to make connections and apply your knowledge to solving problems. Good luck!